My best friend said her son was just being dramatic when he ended up in the hospital. She stayed at the resort while I sat by his bedside. I never thought it would end like this with Marta. We grew up together, you know. Her mom was best friends with mine, that whole neighbor thing that turns into family. When Tiago was born, I was there at the hospital. I remember holding that tiny baby and thinking he'd be like a nephew to me. Marta used to talk about being a mom all the time when we were younger. She had names picked out, whole plans about how many kids she wanted, what kind of parent she'd be. So when Tiago came along, it felt like watching someone's dream actually happen. She seemed happy those first few years. I mean, as happy as anyone with a screaming toddler can be. Tiago and my son Lucas were only 6 months apart, so they basically grew up together. Every weekend one of them was at the other's house. Birthday parties, summer barbecues, that kind of thing. Marta and I did everything together. Our kids were practically brothers. I don't remember exactly when things started feeling off with Marta. Maybe it was gradual. She started making these comments about needing space, about how exhausting it was being someone's mom all the time. Which, fair enough. Everyone gets tired. But there was something in how she said it that felt different. Like she wasn't just venting, she was genuinely resentful. When Tiago was around 12, Marta started taking these trips. Just her. No kid. She'd leave him with her mom or with us and she'd go away for a few days. At first it was just weekends. Then it got longer. A week here, 10 days there. I remember Rob asking me once if I thought it was weird how often she left, and I defended her. Said she deserved breaks, that single parenting was hard. Tiago never said much about it. He'd show up at our house with his backpack and his Nintendo, and he'd just sort of blend in. Quiet kid. Always was. Lucas would try to get him to talk sometimes, ask him stuff about school or whatever, but Tiago mostly just gave short answers. Not in a rude way. Just like he didn't have much to say. Last April, Marta asked if Tiago could stay with us for 2 weeks. She was going to Costa Rica with some guy she'd been seeing. I said sure, of course. Tiago had stayed with us plenty of times. It wasn't a big deal. The first week was completely normal. The boys played video games, we had dinner together, Rob helped them with homework. Standard stuff. But toward the end of that first week, I started noticing Tiago seemed quieter than usual. He wasn't eating much at dinner. He'd disappear into Lucas's room right after school and just stay there. I asked Lucas if everything was okay with Tiago, and Lucas kind of shrugged. Said Tiago had been on his phone a lot, texting someone. I didn't think much of it. 13-year-old boys are on their phones constantly. Then one night, maybe 8 or 9 days into the 2 weeks, I went upstairs to tell the boys it was time for bed. Lucas's door was open, and Lucas was sitting on his bed looking at his phone. But Tiago's sleeping bag was empty. The bathroom door was closed. I knocked. No answer. I called Tiago's name. Nothing. I tried the handle. Locked. That's when I got this feeling in my chest, this tight sort of panic. I don't even know why. Just instinct maybe. I knocked harder, called his name again. Lucas came out into the hallway asking what was wrong, and I told him to get his dad. Rob came upstairs and we tried knocking again, louder this time. Yelling Tiago's name. Nothing. Rob ended up kicking the door open because we couldn't find anything to pick the lock with and I was freaking out by that point. Tiago was on the floor. Just lying there. There were pills scattered around him, an empty bottle, I don't even remember what kind. His phone was next to him with some text messages on the screen. He was breathing but barely and his lips looked weird, kind of pale. I called 911. Rob was trying to wake Tiago up, and Lucas was standing in the doorway crying and asking what happened. I couldn't answer him. I didn't know what to say. The ambulance came fast. They asked me a million questions I couldn't really answer. What did he take, how much, when did I last see him? I didn't know. I kept saying I didn't know. They loaded him onto a stretcher and I rode with him to the hospital while Rob stayed with Lucas. In the ambulance I tried calling Marta. It rang and rang. Then went to voicemail. I left a message, tried to keep my voice steady, told her what happened and that we were going to county hospital and she needed to call me back immediately. She didn't call back. I texted her. Called again. Nothing. At the hospital they took Tiago into the ER and I sat in the waiting room trying to reach Marta over and over. Finally, maybe an hour later, she texted back. Just said she'd been at dinner and her phone was off. Asked what happened. I called her immediately. When she picked up I could hear music in the background, people talking. She sounded relaxed, maybe a little drunk. I told her Tiago was in the emergency room, that he'd taken pills, that they were pumping his stomach. There was this pause. Then she said something like, "Are you sure it's that serious? Maybe he just took too many by accident or something." I remember staring at my phone after she said that. Actually pulling it away from my ear and looking at it like I'd somehow called the wrong person. I told her the doctor said it wasn't an accident. That there were texts on his phone. That this was serious. She needed to come home. Another pause. Then she said she'd look at flights, but everything was probably really expensive on short notice. Could I keep her updated and she'd figure out what to do? She didn't come home that night. Or the next day. Tiago was in the hospital for 3 days. They had to keep him for observation, make sure his organs were okay, get him started with a psychiatrist. The whole time I was texting Marta updates, sending her pictures of him sleeping so she could see he was alive. Her responses got shorter and shorter. Okay. Thanks. Glad he's alright. When they finally released him, the hospital gave me a packet about suicide prevention and a list of therapists, and I just took it all even though I wasn't his parent. What else was I supposed to do? Leave a 13-year-old to figure it out himself? Rob and I talked about what to do. We called Marta together that time, put her on speaker. Told her Tiago was being discharged and what the doctors recommended for follow-up care. She sounded distracted. Said that was good, she'd be home in a few days, could we just keep Tiago a little longer? She'd already paid for her trip. Rob looked at me when she said that. Just looked at me. I don't even know what my face was doing, but I felt something crack inside my chest. I told her fine. She could stay on her trip. But we needed to talk when she got back because Tiago needed help and we needed to figure out a plan. She said sure, whatever, and hung up. Tiago didn't say much after he came home from the hospital. He sat on our couch with a blanket wrapped around him and watched TV with empty eyes. Lucas tried to talk to him a few times, but Tiago just sort of nodded or gave one-word answers. One night, maybe 2 days after the hospital, I sat down next to Tiago and asked him how he was feeling. He didn't answer at first. Then he said really quietly, "Does my mom know what happened?" I told him yes, she knew. He just nodded. Didn't say anything else. But I saw his face do this little crumple, and then he got up and went to bed even though it was only like 7 o'clock. Marta came back a week later. She texted me from the airport saying she'd come pick up Tiago in the afternoon. I texted back that we needed to talk first, that maybe she should come over without Tiago there so we could discuss everything. She showed up around 2. She was tan. Like really tan. She had her hair in beachy waves and she was wearing this flowy dress and sandals. She looked like she'd just come from a spa. She hugged me when I opened the door, said something about how crazy everything had been, and walked into my living room like nothing was wrong. I offered her coffee and she said sure, and then we sat down and I tried to figure out where to even start. I told her the doctors wanted Tiago in therapy at least twice a week. That he needed to see a psychiatrist for medication evaluation. That there were warning signs we needed to watch for. I showed her the packet from the hospital. She barely looked at it. Just kind of glanced at the papers and set them on the coffee table. Then she said, "I think you're making this into a bigger deal than it is. Tiago's a dramatic kid. He always has been. He probably just wanted attention." I actually didn't say anything at first. I just sat there. Because I couldn't believe she'd actually said that. Out loud. To my face. Then I asked her if she understood that her son had tried to kill himself. That this wasn't a phase or teenage drama. That he'd taken enough pills that the doctors said if I'd found him even 30 minutes later he might have died. She rolled her eyes. Literally rolled her eyes. And she said, "You're being dramatic too. He's fine now. Kids do stupid things. It doesn't mean he actually wanted to die." That's when I heard footsteps on the stairs. We both turned and Tiago was standing there. He'd been upstairs with Lucas, but apparently he'd come down at some point. His face was completely blank, but his eyes were wet. Marta saw him and her expression changed for just a second. Like she realized he'd heard what she said. But then she just stood up and said, "Come on Tiago, let's go home. Get your stuff." Tiago didn't move. He just stood there looking at her. She said his name again, sharper this time. He shook his head. Marta's jaw tightened. She told him to stop being ridiculous, that they were leaving. He shook his head again and then he turned and went back upstairs. We heard Lucas's door close. Marta looked at me like this was somehow my fault. Then she said, "What did you say to him? You're turning him against me." I told her I hadn't said anything. That maybe Tiago was upset because she'd chosen to stay on vacation instead of coming home when he was in the hospital. That maybe he'd heard her call his suicide attempt attention-seeking drama. Her face went red. She started raising her voice, saying I didn't understand what it was like being a single parent, that she needed breaks, that I was judging her when I had no idea how hard her life was. That Tiago was being manipulative and I was falling for it. I told her to leave. She said fine, but she was taking Tiago with her. I told her he didn't want to go and she couldn't force him. She said he was 13 years old, he didn't get to decide where he lived. Then she went upstairs. I followed her. She tried to open Lucas's door but it was locked. She pounded on it, yelling at Tiago to open the door. Rob came out of our bedroom asking what was going on. Marta spun around and told Rob to make me stop interfering with her parenting. That I was keeping her son from her. Rob looked at me, then at Marta, and very calmly said that maybe everyone should take a breath and we could talk about this when things were calmer. Marta lost it. Started screaming about how we were both against her, how I'd always been jealous of her, how she was calling the police because we were basically kidnapping her child. Rob told her to go ahead and call them. So she did. Right there in our hallway, she called 911 and said her son was being held against his will and we wouldn't let her take him home. 2 officers showed up maybe 20 minutes later. Marta had gone downstairs to wait for them. Rob and I stayed upstairs outside Lucas's door. I could hear the boys talking quietly inside but couldn't make out what they were saying. When the police came in, Marta immediately started talking. telling them we'd refused to let her son leave, that we'd been alienating him from her, that she'd asked us to watch him for 2 weeks and now we were trying to keep him. She was crying, doing this whole performance. One of the officers asked where Tiago was. I told them he was upstairs, that he'd locked himself in my son's room because he was scared to go with his mother. Marta jumped in saying that was ridiculous, that I'd clearly been poisoning him against her. The female officer asked if she could try talking to Tiago. I said of course. She went upstairs and knocked on Lucas's door. Told him who she was, asked if she could come in and talk. After a minute the door opened. Tiago's face was blotchy and red. The officer went inside and closed the door. The male officer stayed downstairs with us and Marta kept talking, barely taking a breath, explaining her whole side of things. The female officer came back down after maybe 15 minutes. She looked uncomfortable. She said something about this seeming like a family matter that might need CPS involvement rather than police intervention. Marta started protesting but the officer cut her off and made a phone call. A CPS worker showed up eventually. Her name was Beth something. She talked to all of us separately, spent the longest time with Tiago. When she came back downstairs she said that Tiago would be staying with us for at least 72 hours while she did a more thorough investigation. That she had concerns about the circumstances around his hospital stay and his mother's response to the crisis. Marta looked like she wanted to argue but something in Beth's face made her stop. She just grabbed her purse and said fine, 72 hours, but then Tiago was coming home and if we tried to stop her she'd get a lawyer. After she left, Rob made the boys dinner while I sat in our bedroom trying to process what had just happened. This was Marta. My best friend. The person I'd known for 30 years. And she just accused me of kidnapping her kid because I wouldn't send him home with her after he'd tried to kill himself. I called my cousin Rachel that night. She's a family lawyer, handles divorce and custody stuff. I told her everything that had happened and she said I needed to document everything. Every text, every call, every interaction. She said to start keeping a journal with dates and times. That this probably wasn't over. She was right. The next morning my phone was blowing up with texts from people I knew. Marta had posted on Facebook about how I'd stolen her son, how I was mentally unstable, how she needed everyone's prayers to get through this difficult time. Some people were supportive of her, sending her prayers and hearts and comments about how terrible it must be. Others were asking questions, wanting to know my side. A few people texted me directly asking what was really going on. I didn't respond to anyone at first. I was too angry, too exhausted. I just screenshotted everything like Rachel had told me to do and added it to a folder on my computer. Tiago had a therapy appointment scheduled for that Monday. Marta showed up. I'd taken Tiago but was sitting in the waiting room while he was with the therapist. Marta barged in demanding to be let into the session, saying she had a right as his mother. The therapist, Dr. Kim, came out and very calmly asked to speak with Marta privately before making any decisions. They went into a different office. When they came back out maybe 20 minutes later, Marta looked furious. She walked right past Tiago without even looking at him and left the building. Dr. Kim pulled me aside after and said that Marta had demanded access to Tiago's therapy notes and wanted to be included in all future sessions. Dr. Kim had explained that she needed to do what was in Tiago's best interest, and right now that meant individual sessions without parental involvement. Marta had apparently threatened to report Dr. Kim to her licensing board. When we got home, Tiago seemed even quieter than usual. He went straight to Lucas's room and didn't come out for dinner. Lucas brought him a plate and came back down saying Tiago was just lying on the bed staring at the ceiling. That night I heard someone moving around after midnight. I found Tiago sitting on the floor in the hallway. He said he couldn't sleep. I sat down next to him and didn't say anything for a while. Then he asked me why his mom didn't come home when he was in the hospital. I didn't have a good answer. I still don't. I told him I didn't know, that sometimes people don't handle scary situations well. He just nodded. Then he said, really quietly, I found texts on her phone before. Like a few months ago. She was telling her friend that she wished she'd never had me. That her life would be so much better if she didn't have a kid. That she felt trapped. My heart just broke. I didn't know what to say. I asked him if that's why he'd taken the pills and he shrugged. Said it wasn't just that. That everything felt like too much. School and his mom and just everything. We sat there in the hallway until almost 2 in the morning. Then I helped him get back into bed and told him we'd figure this out together. That he wasn't alone. The CPS investigation continued. Beth came back for more interviews, talked to Tiago's school counselor, reviewed his medical records. Meanwhile, Marta was texting Tiago constantly. Some of the messages were loving, calling him baby, saying she missed him. Others were angry, accusing him of choosing me over her, telling him he was making her look bad. Rachel told me to document all of it but not to respond. To let Marta dig her own hole. There was a court hearing scheduled to determine temporary custody. Rachel represented us, though technically we weren't seeking custody, just trying to protect Tiago while things got sorted out. Marta had hired a lawyer too, some guy in an expensive suit who looked like he did personal injury commercials on TV. Judge Morrison presided. She was probably in her 60s, looked stern. She reviewed all the reports from Beth and Dr. Kim, read through the hospital records. Then she asked to speak with Tiago in her chambers. He was in there for about 20 minutes. When he came out, he looked exhausted. Judge Morrison announced she was granting us temporary guardianship for 30 days while a more comprehensive evaluation was completed. Marta could have supervised visits twice a week at the Family Services Center. Marta stood up and started objecting, saying this was insane, that he was her son. The judge told her to sit down or she'd be held in contempt. Marta sat, but she was glaring at me the whole time like this was all my fault. Outside the courthouse, Marta cornered me in the parking lot. Told me I'd ruined her life. That I was a terrible person. That everyone would see through my act eventually. Then she got in her car and peeled out so fast her tires squealed. That 30-day period was awful. Marta missed her first supervised visit, showed up late to the second. When she did come, she brought presents for Tiago, expensive things he didn't need. The supervisor's report said she spent most of the visits taking selfies with him and posting them online with captions about being separated from her baby. Her social media posts got more intense. Daily updates about her struggle, about corrupt CPS workers, about people who pretended to be friends but stole your children. Some posts were clearly about me even though she didn't use my name. Tiago started having nightmares. He'd wake up crying, Rob, or I would hear him and go sit with him until he calmed down. Dr. Kim said it was normal, that he was processing trauma, but it was hard to watch. Lucas was struggling too. Some of his friends' parents had seen Marta's posts and started questioning whether their kids should come over. Lucas came home from school one day and said one of the moms had pulled her son aside and told him to be careful around our family because we were involved in some kind of legal situation. The evaluation period ended. Beth recommended we maintain custody for at least 6 months. That Tiago was thriving in our home, making progress in therapy, and that returning him to Marta's custody would be detrimental. Dr. Kim's report said similar things. Marta fought it. Her lawyer argued that she'd been completing parenting classes and attending therapy. That she'd done everything asked of her. But then Beth revealed something I hadn't known. Marta had been texting Beth directly, trying to convince her to change her recommendation. Some of the texts were manipulative, others were straight up threatening. Judge Morrison extended our guardianship for 6 months. Marta could continue supervised visits but had to complete a psychological evaluation before any changes would be considered. That's when things got really bad. Tiago started getting texts from numbers we didn't recognize. Horrible messages calling him names, telling him to finish what he started, saying nobody wanted him anyway. We changed his number twice, but somehow the messages kept coming. Then someone posted Tiago's new number on some forum online encouraging people to harass him. The school had to get involved because kids were texting him during class. We eventually just got rid of his phone entirely. The harassment escalated. Someone egged our house. My car got keyed in the work parking lot. Rob found a note on his windshield saying we'd regret stealing someone's child. We couldn't prove it was Marta. But Beth was able to trace one of the harassment numbers to a prepaid phone purchased near Marta's apartment. The store's security footage showed someone who looked like Marta buying it, though she was wearing sunglasses and a hat. Beth filed additional reports with the court. Judge Morrison issued a restraining order. Marta couldn't contact Tiago at all, not even through third parties. Her supervised visits were suspended pending a hearing about the harassment. That hearing was tense. Marta's lawyer tried to argue there was no proof she'd sent the messages. But then Beth introduced phone records showing calls between Marta's regular number and the prepaid one. Marta had called herself from the burner phone, probably testing it, and that created a link. Judge Morrison was not happy. She extended the restraining order for a year and ordered Marta to undergo a complete psychological evaluation before any custody discussions would continue. Marta's evaluation came back eventually. I didn't see the whole thing, but Rachel got a copy of the relevant sections. The psychologist noted narcissistic tendencies and said Marta had difficulty seeing Tiago as a separate person rather than an extension of herself. Recommended intensive therapy and no unsupervised contact with Tiago until significant progress was made. Around this time, something unexpected happened. Marta's mom, Carmen, reached out to me. We'd always gotten along fine, but I hadn't talked to her much since everything started. She asked if we could meet for coffee. I was nervous, but I agreed. We met at a Starbucks halfway between our houses. Carmen looked tired. She apologized for not reaching out sooner, said she hadn't known how bad things had gotten until recently. That Marta had been telling her I'd turned Tiago against her and stolen him, but then Carmen had talked to Beth and seen some of the court documents. She said Marta had always been difficult even as a kid. That she'd had a hard time when things didn't go her way. That Carmen had hoped she'd grow out of it, but instead it seemed to have gotten worse. Carmen asked if Tiago was okay. I told her honestly that he was doing better but still struggling. She asked if she could see him sometime. I said I'd talk to him about it, see how he felt. Tiago was hesitant at first. But after a few weeks he agreed to let Carmen visit. She came to our house and brought old photo albums of Tiago as a baby. They sat on the couch together looking at pictures and Carmen told him stories about when he was little. It was sweet. Tiago seemed lighter after she left. Carmen started coming over once a week or so. She never pushed Tiago to talk about Marta or the court stuff. She just spent time with him. Brought him books she thought he'd like. Taught him how to make these cookies she used to make for Marta when she was a kid. The 6-month review came up. Dr. Kim reported that Tiago had made significant progress but still had anxiety about seeing his mother. Beth recommended continuing our guardianship and maintaining the restraining order. Judge Morrison agreed. Marta didn't take it well. She posted a long rant on Facebook about corrupt judges and a broken system. But this time fewer people responded with support. Some of the details from the court case had leaked through mutual friends and people were starting to piece together what had really happened. A few months after that, something strange happened. Tiago got a message on Instagram from someone claiming to be his father. Marta had always told him his dad had left before he was born and wanted nothing to do with them. She said she didn't even know where he was. Tiago showed me the message. It was from an account under the name David Reyes. The message said he'd heard through mutual friends that Tiago had been in the hospital and he wanted to know if he was okay. That he'd been trying to reach out for years, but Marta had blocked his number and refused to let him see Tiago. I didn't know what to do with that. I told Rachel about it and she said we needed to investigate before letting Tiago respond. She hired someone to track down David Reyes and verify his story. Turns out David was real. He lived about 2 hours away, worked in IT, was married with a baby daughter. He dated Marta in college, gotten her pregnant accidentally. They tried to make it work but broke up when Tiago was about 2. David said he'd had regular visits with Tiago until the kid was 4. Then Marta moved away for a job and stopped answering his calls. He'd gone to court to enforce visitation, but Marta kept moving, kept changing jobs. Eventually his lawyer told him it would cost tens of thousands to keep fighting and he couldn't afford it. So he kept paying child support through the state system and hoped that someday Tiago would reach out on his own. Rachel contacted David's lawyer to verify his story. It all checked out. David had been paying child support this entire time. Had a whole box of birthday cards and gifts he'd tried to send over the years that got returned because Marta had moved and left no forwarding address. Tiago was confused and angry when he learned the truth. He asked why Marta would lie about something like that. I didn't have a good answer because I didn't understand it either. We arranged a meeting between Tiago and David, supervised at first with a therapist present. It was awkward. How could it not be? This kid meeting his father for the first time when he's 13 years old. But they looked alike. Same nose, same way of fidgeting with their hands when nervous. They met a few more times. Started building something. David was careful not to push too hard. He let Tiago set the pace. By the time a few months had passed, they were talking regularly, and Tiago had even spent a weekend at David's house meeting his wife and baby half-sister. David petitioned for formal visitation rights. Judge Morrison granted it easily. The custody arrangement became complicated but workable. Tiago lived with us primarily, spent alternating weekends with David, and maintained his relationship with his grandmother Carmen. Marta was still blocked from contact pending completion of her treatment. Marta's response was to show up at our house at 3 in the morning banging on the door. Rob called 911 immediately. She was arrested for violating the restraining order. Spent a night in jail. Got released on bail but the charges stuck. After that she seemed to give up. The social media posts stopped. Her lawyer withdrew from her case. She moved to a different town, we heard through Carmen. Started over somewhere else. Tiago is 15 now. He's doing okay mostly. Still in therapy but not as frequently. Gets decent grades. Has friends again. He spends more time with David these days, which I think is good. They're building something real. He still has bad days sometimes. Days where he doesn't want to get out of bed or talk to anyone. But they're less frequent than they used to be. Dr. Kim says that's normal, that trauma doesn't just disappear. Marta sends a card on his birthday sometimes. Always appropriate, never pushing. Tiago doesn't respond, but he doesn't throw them away either. Keeps them in a box in his closet. Carmen says Marta is in therapy, actually doing the work this time. Whether that's true I don't know. I don't miss Marta exactly. More like I miss who I thought she was. The friend I thought I had. But that person might have never existed. Maybe I just saw what I wanted to see for 30 years. Lucas and Tiago are still close. They fight sometimes like brothers do, but they look out for each other. Lucas gets protective if anyone at school says anything about Tiago's situation. Got suspended once for punching a kid who made a suicide joke. I had to pretend to be upset about it, but honestly I was kind of proud. Rob still worries about security. Checks the cameras before bed every night. Makes sure all the doors are locked. It's probably excessive at this point, but I don't stop him. Whatever helps him feel safe. Carmen is talking about moving closer to us. She says she wants to be around more for Tiago. That she missed too much already. Sometimes at night I think about that moment when I kicked open the bathroom door and found Tiago on the floor. How different everything would be if I'd gotten there even 15 minutes later. The doctor said it was close. That we were lucky. I don't feel lucky exactly. More like relieved. And exhausted. And sometimes angry that I'm in this position at all, that I'm raising someone else's kid because she couldn't be bothered to come home from vacation when he nearly died. But then I look at Tiago, see him laughing at something Lucas said or helping Carmen in the kitchen, and I think maybe this is just what family is supposed to be. Not perfect, not what anyone planned, but real. Last week Tiago asked me if I was ever going to get tired of dealing with him. If I ever wished he'd just gone home to his mom that first night. I told him honestly that no, I'd never wish that. That he belonged here as long as he wanted to stay. He nodded and went back to his homework. Didn't say anything else about it. But later that night I saw he'd changed his emergency contact at school from Marta to me. Such a small thing, but it felt like something. I don't know what happens next. If Marta will ever actually change. If Tiago will want a relationship with her someday. If all this legal stuff will ever fully be resolved. I'm just taking it one day at a time, same as I've been for almost 2 years now. Some days are hard. Some days I'm angry at Marta for putting us all through this. Some days I'm just tired. But Tiago is safe and healing, and that's what matters. The friendship with Marta is dead. Has been for a while. I've accepted that. Mourned it in whatever way you mourn a relationship that was apparently built on lies and a version of someone who never really existed. But in its place there's this weird little family we've built. Rob and me and Lucas and Tiago. David and his wife and baby. Carmen. All these people who showed up for a kid who needed them. That's worth more than a friendship that was fake to begin with.